Welcome to this video that will discuss how to fill out the 96 well spreadsheet to customize your experiments for high throughput measurements at LIX. So the first thing you're going to do is navigate to our Beamline wiki page. Scroll down to the mail-in information link, which will bring you to a folder that contains a lot of different files. Here in this video, we're just going to focus on these two spreadsheets, the plate spreadsheet template, and we're going to go through an example. The plate spreadsheet template is what you'll actually use to upload the samples for your measurements. It's important that you use this template file and not copy and paste this into another spreadsheet, as the validation won't work and you won't be able to generate a QR code. So please use this template here. If you're confused about what type of 96 well plate to send in or why you're even using this spreadsheet, check out our previous video that discusses the different format or the 96 well format and all the equipment or consumables that you'll need to purchase in order to accomplish this experiment. So here we're just going to go through an example. So we're going to click on the plate spreadsheet example. And it's a pretty straightforward layout. It just copies. In the first column is the well, and so that's all 96 wells. So you have 12 columns and A through H on for the rows. And the first example here is a straightforward experiment. So this is just going to discuss a relatively simple experiment. This will go through a dilution series, and then this is the mixing or additives in case you want to do that kind of customization. So if you're confused as to why we're only using rows or columns 1 through 9, please check out that other video that'll show you the LIX sample holder format and why we do this. So columns 10, 11, and 12 are blacked out in the spreadsheet because you can use those for your stock solutions. So some basic rules apply. The one thing we already mentioned was to use the template. The second rule is that you need to have multiple buffers per sample. And in fact, the software won't let you do more than 4 samples without a buffer. So you need to have at least 2 buffers per sample set to do the proper subtraction. Secondly, is that the format of the text has some rules. So there are no special characters, there are no spaces. You can use dashes and underscores, but that's about it. So when filling this out, clearly in the sample column, you put all the samples in the buffer. In the buffer column, you put the buffer that you would like to use for a particular sample subtraction. So here, buffer 1 and sample 1 are associated. So after the experiment is done, the subtraction will automatically use buffer 1 and subtract that from sample 1, and the same here, buffer 1 from sample 2. The location where the buffer is actually located is left blank. And here is the volume that you'll be using in the experiment, so 60 microliters. So that's pretty straightforward. In the second example, we're going to do a dilution series, which is a very common experiment. So here we actually have stock solutions in columns 10, 11, and 12. So we have 2 buffer stocks with 150 microliters, and then we have a sample stock, which contains 100 microliters. And so the only thing that's different here is that in the mixing column, you're going to specify which cell to take the buffer and sample, and then it'll mix and put it into the right well. So here, what's going to happen is we're going to take 60 microliters from B10, so that's 60 microliters of buffer, and 12 and B12 will take 6 microliters of your sample stock. It'll put it into well B2 and do the mixing here. And so this formula here makes up sample 8. And you can do this as many times as you want for each of the different samples that you have. So it's just a well volume pair. Okay, and then the next type is a additive, where you can do mixing. So a lot of times somebody might want to do an experiment where you have a sample stock and then you have a ligand stock or something like this, you can do those types of experiments. So you can also, another common way is if you have a ligand that is a very small quantity, you can actually preload the well with that particular additive or ligand. You could also lyophilize that and then have that solution, have that sample reconstituted with a sample stock. That's another way for good shipment, especially if you have only 1 or 2 microliters. This way you don't have to worry about evaporating. So it depends on the stability of your sample and how much volume you have in your sample, or the concentration essentially. So here what you're going to do is, in this case, the buffer is just taking 60 microliters from C9. So in this case, we have a buffer stock in C9. And then for sample 15, it's made up of 60 microliters of C11. So it's just a sample stock. And then here, what we're doing is we're taking 60 microliters of C9 and putting it into the well C3. And so that's your new buffer. And it came preloaded with 5 microliters of whatever the additive was. Okay, so you put 5 microliters of your additive, and now we're just mixing that in. So now you have your new buffer. And the same thing goes here. So we have 5 microliters that you preloaded into well C4, and then we're going to take 60 microliters from C11, the sample, and mix with that. Okay, so now you have a additive buffer that you can subtract from the sample plus additive. So now you'll only get the scattering from your sample. So once that's all done, you can have multiple spreadsheets for multiple different plates. And then you have to move on to the next step, which is using Jupyter Hub. Is using the Jupyter Notebook to validate the spreadsheet to make sure everything is formatted correctly, which will then generate a QR code. And that video is next to help you get that information.